In today's video, I'm gonna show you the best settings for the Mevo Call for live streaming. We're gonna be using the Mevo camera app, which is the app that's actually made specifically to control the Mevo camera. So we're gonna be using that application, and I'm gonna show you all the settings, the best exposure, the zooming, the white balance, all the good stuff to make sure you have a very good looking picture for your Mevo camera. So let's not take much time, let's get into it. What's going on, guys? My name is Sam. You're watching the production tips and tools, and of course I'm not gonna take much time before you know about the new Mevo Core camera from Logitech, which is an interchangeable lens streaming camera with a lot of features, including wireless streaming, which is, for me, in my opinion, one of the best feature that this camera has. So I'm not gonna take much time, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and actually ask you to go to, if you don't have the application yet, now we have two main applications when it comes to controlling this camera. So the first one is the Mevo multicam application. That one is designed to give you the ability to control multiple Mevo Core cameras and to be able to go live. And then the other application is the Mevo app, and that one is designed to be able to control individually the any Mevo camera. For today, we're talking about the Mevo Core. So if you have only one camera, or even if you have multiple cameras but you want to control each camera individually, that's the application that you need, especially if you don't want to be dealing with the multicam application. Again, if you don't have multiple camera, you don't need that one. So you're gonna go to App Store or Google Play and download the Mevo app. Once you have it downloaded, make sure your Mevo camera is connected on the same network as your phone, your tablet, or your iPad, whatever device are using to run the application. Another thing is, if you don't have Wi-Fi, you can always use the camera's Wi-Fi. It's just in the menu when the application is going to prompt you to connect to Wi-Fi. Just say that you don't have Wi-Fi and it's gonna allow you to connect to the camera's Wi-Fi. That's possible as well. But for now, we have the camera and the phone connected to the same network, and as you can see, this is the first screen. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna go ahead, and as you can see, it has found the Mevo Core, which is the camera that I'm using to record this video. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and hit connect to Mevo. As soon as you open the app, you should be able to see it, no problem. So now we are connecting. Now this is inside the actual application. For me, I'm not gonna go through everything, but I'm gonna show you the best settings to be able to get a good looking picture, especially for your live streaming. Again, this is gonna depend on the type of lens that you use. It's gonna depend on the type of lighting that you have. Okay, this may vary, but I'm gonna give you my best recommendations when it comes to exposure and stuff like that. So when you go, most of it actually is gonna be under these three dots kind of menu here. This is where you're gonna find everything. The first thing you have to pay attention to, because the Mevo Core, as of now, it doesn't have autofocus. Again, it's on my wish list. I hope Logitech, the whole thing is kind of software based, so I hope they're going to implement autofocus, because that's gonna make our life easier. But for now, we don't have autofocus, but I'm gonna show you how to easily focus, because the last thing you want is to have a picture that is actually out of focus. So when you open, you actually have the manual focusing tab here. As you can see here, it says manual. You can change to, let's say, if I go here to lens, basically if you change to lens, that means you want to be focusing using the lens, not the application. However, for us, we want to keep it to manual, unless you're using a manual lens, and that cannot be electronically focused. But most of you guys, you're gonna be using the actual electronic lenses that can focus, where the camera can control to focus. All right, and that's what you're gonna be using. So you want to make sure you keep it to manual. Now you have this little slider here that you can use to focus. As you can see, as I play with it, it's gonna go in and out of focus. Now, to be able to get accurate focus, my best way of focusing is actually by, I go here and just tap once in my face. Again, for now, I'm gonna be focusing on myself. This is gonna depend on what you're trying to focus on. If you're trying to focus on yourself, usually you wanna make sure your eyes are in focus. That's the main goal. So you're just gonna go for your eyes. And again, for the lens, I'm using the 14 to 42 mm lens that come depending on the kit that you get, which is one of the lenses that I actually would recommend if you buy the Mevo Core cameras. But again, I'm gonna make another video where I'm gonna share with you guys my favorite lenses and the best lenses that I recommend for these cameras. So what you need to do is you can double tap. So what I would do, usually I'll look into the frame, so make sure I zoomed all the way in, and I look at the camera and I would just double tap. All right. And as you can see, the camera already put my face in focus. Now I can actually now zoom out by just touching the screen like this. Okay, kind of frame with my 2 fingers, which is a cool feature that I like because the lens is super wide. So I'll just frame whatever I feel like I want my frame to look like, something like this. Okay, this looks good. And then boom. So now when I look at myself, I feel like I'm completely in focus. I can see my eyes are in focus and everything is in focus, and my background is actually out of focus, which is awesome. So that's what we want. So that's how you focus. That's the best way. Again, you can touch to any object in the frame and the camera is going to focus on it. It doesn't have to be your eyes. Just again, the best way to see it well, again, if you're using a zoom lens, power zoom lens, is just to double tap, make sure you zoomed in all the way in for you to be able to see it. Double tap to whatever you want to focus on and then reframe after that. That's for the focusing. Next up, we're gonna go ahead and actually go to these 3 dots here. This is where everything. So if you go to, there's one that called assistant. In my opinion, this one, I never use it, never tried it. It actually asks you to find the faces and stuff like that. So this pro, if you're shooting many people, can actually help you, identify some stuff. We have live follow, autopilot. So again, I never tried this one and probably would be useful if you shooting multiple people. As you can see, it's kind of tracking my face. Okay, this is probably gonna be useful when we start doing the when we get the autofocus inside the frame, inside the application. Because right now, if I go, I don't know if it's really following me. So for now, we don't need it. I'm just gonna turn off. Probably in the future is gonna be useful. And then we got the mixer here. The mixer, this is mostly for audio. So if you're controlling the camera, let's say if you're using the camera with the built-in microphone, which it's a good microphone, but I don't recommend it that much if you can have an external microphone, because with an external microphone, you have more control, right? So again, if you use an external microphone, you have controls here. As you can see, let's say if you see this part where it says Mevo Aux, first of all, the output, these are the levels of your microphone. In my opinion, I'll keep it as 0, so I wouldn't change anything here. Okay, and then we have, of course, audio mixer, so make sure it's turned on here. Okay, and basically what's gonna do, again, if you're using your phone right now, it's actually sending the audio. So you want to make sure your volume is all the way down. Okay, because if it's not all the way down, it's gonna create some feedback. Okay, so now the audio is on from the camera, because at first it was actually muted. So make sure it's on. So the Mevo Aux, this is the actual, this little input here on the Mevo camera here. Okay, and what you need to do, you have 2 options, very, very important. Okay, you have the option to toggle line level stereo or mic level mono. Okay, what it means is if you have a microphone, something like a shotgun microphone that you connect directly into the camera, you're gonna make sure you actually click mic level. Okay, you're gonna toggle that option. Why? Because the camera is going to recognize the signal as just a microphone. Now, if you're using something like I have an interface, the Rodecaster Duo, or using any other interface, and you have this 3.5mm jack kind of input, something like this going to the camera, all right, something like this one, okay, you want to make sure you toggle line level stereo. Okay, why? Because the camera is going to process that audio as a line level, which is different. They say you toggle mic level and then you use an interface on that, you may get some clipping audio. The way the camera is going to treat that audio may be undesirable. Okay, so you want to make sure you actually toggle this depending on what you're doing exactly. Okay, so that's that. And personally, I'm gonna be using line level most of the time, so I'm gonna leave it there. That's that for the audio. Now, the next thing we're going to do, we're gonna go to lens control. Okay, this is where you do the focusing. This is where you control your aperture. This is where you control your zoom. This is where you actually control your peaking and everything. Okay, now the focusing already do it. If you toggle this little thing, again, I don't want to be playing with my face again. It's gonna focus and out of focus. We did it. For aperture, depending on the lens I use. Now, if you new to aperture stuff, Aperture, what means is the opening of the lens. Okay, so basically a lower number of aperture, like for example, if I click on this lens, you can see that usually it goes from 3.5 up to 22.6, basically 22. And as you can see, as I get to 22, the image is darker. Okay, so that means is the aperture, the lens is closing and we're not getting really enough light into the camera. That's what it means. We're also not getting that much of depth of field or the bokeh or the blurry background. Okay, so in most cases, unless you want something else, but you want to keep the lowest aperture possible, because that's where you get the most light coming into the lens, but also that's where you get the best bokeh or the blurry background. Okay, so you want to keep it to the lowest you can. Right, so right now, because it's zoomed in, it's actually giving me 3.8 aperture. That's the best that I can get at this zoom level. Now some lenses, I have this lens can go up to 1.4. that means it's gonna give me really a good bokeh or depth of field, and at the same time it's gonna give me a lot of light, so which means my picture is gonna be really super rich and bright, and you just have to compensate. Too much light is not good, but you can also actually work on that with the ISO and other stuff if you want to get the blurry background. All right, so that's the aperture. Next up, we got the zoom. Of course, zoom speaks for itself. If you want to zoom in, depending on the lens that you have, if you're using a prime lens, basically a prime lens is a lens that doesn't zoom. Like this one is 16, it just stays there, or it never changes. But the one that I'm using is 14 to 42. That means it can zoom from 14 to 42. So as you can see right now, I'm actually at 14. If I wanted to, I can actually go ahead and zoom in slowly. And I'm gonna get to something like 30 or something, right? As you can see at this point, I'm super zoomed in, and this is not something that you want. Again, depending on what you're doing, this is where you control the zoom. Again, depending on the lens that you are actually using. Okay, another thing you need to pay attention to is the peaking. All right, so if you go to peaking, we can go to, if I turn it on. So basically the peaking is to kind of help you, as you can see on the application, to show you what's in focus. Sometimes it's not accurate. As you can see, it's showing my face is in focus, but everything, my background in focus according to the peaking, but technically it's not. What's in the background there, like my monitor and everything, is out of focus. So sometimes it's not that accurate, okay, but it's close, right? This can help you to see what's in focus, especially if you want to open your eyes and look at the monitor at the same time, see if you are in focus. So you can turn it on, especially to assist you with focus. Just keep in mind on the app is gonna show these lines, and that's to actually tell you that you are in focus or not. Next up, we're gonna go to the dots again. We got the lens control, we got the mixer, and now we're gonna go to image control. This is where the magic really happens. As you can see, I have a preset which is custom. So usually whatever you do, everything we're just doing is going to be saved on a custom preset. We have some other presets, and in my opinion, I would say the custom one is the one that you made personally. I think is the best. But other than that, if you're a beginner, you can play with things like normal, you can play with things like stage, depending on backlit, outdoors, highlight. So this is gonna depend on where you are. Maybe if you are on the go and you go outdoors, you can actually set the camera to detect. As you can see, this doesn't look that wow, but if I was outdoor, it's just gonna detect the lighting. Usually outdoors, it's kind of, it's the sunlight, and it should match exactly with the preset of the camera. So if you are on the go, kind of running, you don't have time to play with the settings, you can just go to the presets. Depending on where you are, just choose one preset and keep it, and it should be good. But again, we're gonna go ahead and go to custom because that's my actual preset here. All right, now exposure mode. Personally, I recommend everybody to use the auto exposure. Why? Because auto exposure, if you're not really familiar with cameras and you don't know much about cameras like this, auto exposure, I think the camera does a good job. It's just going to adjust everything for you and make sure it looks good actually. So again, you can also go to shutter or manual. And then if you go to manual, you're going to kind of adjust everything manually. If you are experienced, it's okay. But if you're not, even if you're experienced, personally, I use the auto exposure because it just works perfectly. In my opinion, you don't have to play with these settings, honestly, unless you have too much time to waste. All right. Now we're gonna go to exposure. You can keep it at 0. You don't have to change anything unless you see that maybe you're in a place where you're struggling with lighting. You can play with the exposure. Try to add, it's like artificially add more exposure, but 0 should work fine, no problem. Now, if you put to auto exposure, usually the camera is going to choose the shutter speed for you and the ISO for you. Okay. Now, for me, what I did here, I actually changed. You can actually start from auto if you are in an office like mine. Okay. You can go to from auto, just change it to manual. Okay. And then it's just gonna keep what it had on auto. And then go to shutter speed. Now we're shooting at 30 frames per second. If I go 1/30, it's kind of too low. Okay. Because if I wave like this, sometimes you can see that the motion blur is kind of blurry. You know, if I'm moving or doing stuff, it's gonna be blurred. So if you're doing a 30, if you know you're gonna be moving a lot, the picture may look a little blurry, you know, when I, wave my hand. So you wanna go ahead and actually choose 1/60. And then once you choose 1/60, you can see that the picture is getting darker a little bit. Yeah, because that's what the camera was doing to compensate for the light. So we can go ahead and actually boost the ISO to something like 800. Instead of having a 400, we can boost it to something like 800. Now, as you can see, the picture is coming back to what it was before. Okay. Again, if you don't want to mess with these things, you can go to auto exposure. Depending on your lighting, okay, you may be okay if you don't have motion and stuff like that. But I'm showing you guys how to take over, control your camera, be in control. All right. So ISO 800. Now, once you go over 800, like 1600, you can see that the camera starts adding too much light. And I also recommend for micro four third cameras. Now I have my Panasonic GH5. Usually I try to stay around 800. But this one is new to me, so I don't know if I go above 800, something like 1600, if I'm gonna get a grainy picture. Now it looks good, doesn't look grainy, but I always recommend to stay around 800. Okay, now if you don't have a choice where lighting is an issue, you can try 1600 and see how it does. Whenever you play with the ISO, just watch out for if the picture is not grainy. All right. Now for the white balance, right now I have it on auto, and actually looks good. It looks better than what I had before. But for following the rules, usually because my key light, okay, so your white balance has to follow your key light usually. So if you are outdoors, it should be 5600 Kelvin, okay. Mine, if you buy a light, usually it will tell you what's the color temperature of that light. So I don't follow the lights in the background. I follow my key light, which is coming to my face. The reason why I don't want to use auto white balance is because it's gonna keep changing. As you can see, as I move, right, the lighting changes. It's detecting my key light, but it's detecting the lights in the background and it keeps adjusting to get the best picture. So that's not good. It doesn't look professional because it keeps changing. If you're outside, you can use daylight, cloudy, whatever. But what you need to do is you need to actually know the color temperature of your key light, which is for me 5600 Kelvin. So just Google it, whatever light you have, and make sure you know the color temperature. So for me, I'm gonna go ahead and actually choose the exact number, and it's gonna be locked in, which is 5600 Kelvin. This one right here. So it's gonna be locked in and it's not gonna change. So this is what my image is supposed to look like. Now it looks a little reddish, and this has to do with the saturation. So we're gonna go play with the saturation and make sure it looks good. All right. And brightness, usually you don't want to play with the brightness, and the only thing I'm gonna change is the saturation because the picture was oversaturated. So as you can see, if I take it to 0.7, there's no saturation, there's no life. So you need to take it up a little bit to, yeah, something like 0.9. Okay, this is good. This is good in my opinion. Okay, 0.9 looks perfect. It's not saturated and the color is kind of balanced. I got a little bit of you know, the vibes in my background because I got a little bit of pink, and it's normal because it's kind of bleeding on my face, and it's okay, right? It doesn't look supernatural, and it's okay because I want to have this kind of, you know, purple vibe in my studio. You want it to reflect a little bit on your face too. It's not bad, you know. Again, my key light is pure white. All right. So, and then the next thing is, again, saturation is good. Contrast, you can keep it the way it is. Again, I can play, maybe put my contrast to 0.9, see if it changes anything. Yeah, it's actually, again, 0.91 is still okay. All right. So again, I'm probably gonna keep it at 1. All right. So if you need HDR, you can actually turn on here. Again, if you're using HDR, you just gotta make sure everything you're working with has HDR. So I'm gonna turn it off because your software, right now I'm actually sending an HDMI out into the Aperture Mini Pro, my software that I'm using to record. So you wanna make sure everything supports HDR. But if it doesn't, the whole ecosystem doesn't support HDR, then it's not worth it. You can just turn it off. All right. Flip, this is if you have the camera maybe mounted in kind of upside down and you want to flip the image. So if I turn it on, as you can see, it should flip my image, right? So you can see in the app that my image is flipped. Okay, again, we don't want that, so I'm gonna go ahead and actually hit off, and it's gonna bring it back. All right. And then mirroring, crop, again, you can leave it the way it is. You don't have to play with this. You can wide or crop, whatever. EIS, this is electronic image stabilization. You can use this if you're using the camera handheld, just to be able to, you know, stabilize the image electronically. So if you have the camera on a tripod, you don't need to touch this. Anti-flicker, you can have it on auto. If you have some lights flickering in the back, again, auto should work. If you see you have some problems, you can play with the frequency. If you know the exact frequency of the lights, you can actually choose which frequency from 50 to 60. You got 50, 60, or just off auto. So personally, I'll leave in on auto, and if there's any problem, then you can actually try to change your settings. Now, exposure, mirroring, keep it the way it is. Sharpness, again, keep it on medium. For me, it looks sharp, and you don't want it to be too sharp either. And that's pretty much it. So once you're done, whatever you just did is gonna be saved under preset custom. So you don't have to change it. Every time you're gonna log into the application, the camera is gonna save the settings for you, and you should be good. All right. So now we can go ahead and actually close the menu. And the next thing after the image control is just the library. Now the library, this is where you're gonna have some media. If you're doing some recordings of the camera image inside your phone, you're gonna see some images here. So again, we don't need this. Help, if you need help. Settings, we're gonna go to settings. This is where you're gonna do some of the networking stuff, enabling NDI, SRT, and stuff like that, going live and everything. But again, for the purpose of this video, these are just the best settings to get the best image. But I'm gonna go through everything here. As you can see, this is for live streaming, so this is gonna be for a different video. Audio and video, again, you can choose if you want to frame rate. You can actually keep it at 30 for the HDMI output. Okay, as you can see, we have highest quality when available. So again, for the HDMI output, as you can see, I can output up to 1080 60 frames per second. Again, if the camera has that, because this application is not just for the Mevo Core. The Mevo Core can give you up to 30 frames per second. So you can actually leave it the way it is. All right. Recording settings, you can go in here, and as you can see, we have 4K. If you want to record in 4K, this is if you have an SD card inserted inside the camera, so you can actually choose 4K. If you want to record in 1080, you can actually use, again, toggle 1080. If you want to go lower, I don't see why you want to go lower, but it's available as well. Now, if you want to use HEVC, this is a different codec that's it's gonna give you better quality, and of course it's gonna give you full low bit rate. Again, most people, H265 is actually perfect for most systems, but if you're doing things like SRT, it's gonna be for another video. We're gonna use the HEVC. So H264 should be okay, and then use default bit rate. Again, This is gonna be, you don't have to play with this really that much, or whatever bit rate that you have. I don't want to be giving you too much. Okay, at this point you want to keep it as simple as possible, so you can leave it the way it is. All right, built-in microphone, you can toggle. If you want to use internal mics, you can actually toggle this. And if you want to use the echo suppression, like noise cancellation, you can do that. Personally, I don't like it. Sometimes it makes the audio sounds a little weird. Again, you can do some testing and see what it sounds like. And then we got USB audio, mixed audio channels. You can leave it toggled. I believe this is for probably for a different camera. And maximum zoom, you can leave everything here. You don't have to play with it that much. Okay. And then we can go back and go to application app settings. You don't have to play with this. Mevo settings, this is where you can, if you want to add a password to the camera for the light and everything. Again, this section you can leave it the way it is. Really don't, it's not going to affect the quality of the image of your recordings. And last, we can go to NDI mode. This is where if you want to toggle NDI, this is for a different video. SRT, a different video. So another thing here, if you want to actually enable wired webcam, if you want to connect the camera using USB directly to your computer, you can go ahead and actually toggle this. And what's gonna do, as you can see, if I toggle it, it's gonna beep twice and it's gonna allow my camera to be used as a webcam connected directly to my computer. But again, HDMI is gonna still send the image because that's how I'm recording this video. So if you need that feature, of course, you can go there. All right. So again, everything is there. You can turn it off. The camera is gonna beep twice and then boom. If you don't need it, you don't need to use it. All right. So everything else, guys, you can leave it the way it is. Again, you can even turn off the camera by simply hitting this button here, and it's gonna turn off the camera, or if you want to disconnect it from the app. So technically, as you can see, my image looks good, but again, this is gonna depend on the lens I'm using, so many factors. But for the lens that we have, the 14 to 42, which is the lens that I actually recommend the most if you're getting this camera, should be the first lens. But if you want to see some other lenses that I recommend for this Mevo Core camera, you want to make sure you watch my next video, because I got a lot of lens, guys, and I'm going to be talking about those and giving you the best recommendations when it comes to the best lenses for the Mevo Core, depending on the use case scenarios. And I'm gonna explain in that video, show you which lens is the best for which scenario depending on how you're gonna be using it. So I'm gonna make sure the video is linked right here, so make sure you watch it, and I'll see you there, guys. Take care.